guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do a Q&A. Where did you find motivation to stop letting your ED have control? One major one for me was looking at what my eating disorder was giving me and what a life free from my eating disorder would be giving me. And let me tell you, a life free from my eating disorder was going to give me so much more than a life stuck with my eating disorder was. Personally, I was a massive dreamer and a goal setter, and so I knew I wanted to travel, I knew I wanted to have a family someday, and I had these very clear on my walls, on my placemat. I had them around me all the time. So in the moments where I was like, can I do this or not? I was reminded of why I was doing this, and yes, it did help me. So knowing my clear goals, my motivation, my reasons to recover was really important. What is a thing you love most about yourself? What a lovely question. And I'm gonna answer it because I think we often find it hard to talk about ourselves in nice ways. The thing I love most about myself is my kind nature and my empathy. I don't pretend that I understand what everyone's going through, but I'm always there to listen. And I'm strong. I'm blimmin' strong. I fought the toughest battle that I hope anyone ever has to fight. Fighting mental illness is not easy, and I got through that. And so I love my strength and my determination. Why did you start advocating? I started advocating because when I was unwell, I wished there was someone like me and Jazz to look up to and be inspired by, and to let my younger self know that I could get through what I was going through. And also for me, there is so much change I want to see in this space, and it's easy to sit back and try and let someone else do it, but I was like, no, if I want to make change or see change, I've got to be part of making that. So a big part of advocating for me was allowing others to know that they're not alone and to fight for change within the eating disorder, OCD and mental health space. What is one thing you regret? I think everything that I've done and everything through my life has been a learning experience, and in the moments where I've been like, oh, I wish I didn't do that, I've learned so much from those moments, and so yeah, I don't know if there is anything I regret. Maybe the one thing I regret is not opening up about my story earlier. And that's easy to say now that I'm such an open book, but I wasn't ready, and I think that's important to know too. So when I finally came out with my story and shared it to the world, I was in a really wonderful place. I was ready to deal with that. Stigma around not being skinny enough to have an eating disorder or not being ill enough. I'm gonna do a whole video on not being sick enough because it's one of the things I hear the most, and it breaks my heart. I've had people come up to me saying, I'm really struggling with an eating disorder, but I don't feel I can get help because I don't fit the stereotype. But if you're struggling with your body, your relationship to your body, you're struggling with food, you're struggling with your self-worth, whatever it may be, if you're struggling and you're engaging in unhealthy behaviors, then you are worthy of help. How did you start fighting to get better? I was in a position where I wasn't really given a choice as such. I was able to work on recovery or die. That was kind of where I was at in my journey. And again, that's gonna be different for everyone. But I had no option, and I wasn't gonna die. I knew I had a life that I wanted to live. I knew that I was more than my eating disorder, that it was worth fighting. Not to say that that made it easy at all, but I was kind of forced into starting. I was admitted to hospital, and that's where my journey began. For anyone starting recovery, I think it's important to know what you're fighting for, to have reasons to recover. For in those moments where you're like, I can't do this, I don't want to do this, you're reminded of why you are doing this. Do you think it's important to be followed by a dietitian during eating disorder recovery? Personally, my dietitian made a huge difference in my life. I found it very beneficial and would recommend if it's an option that's available for you or your team think it would be helpful for you. And for me, I needed quite a prescribed meal plan to get me into the rhythm of eating again. I had no idea how much I should be eating. I didn't feel hunger cues, and so I had to learn all that sort of stuff. I had to learn about food choices and how to choose what I wanted to eat, and so having a dietitian really supported me through that process. What was it like being hospitalized for the first time? I'll also do a whole nother video on my experience in hospital. It was scary. I remember being told to pack an overnight bag. I'd just come home for an appointment, and I got a call from my mum, got a call saying that I needed to go to the emergency department. There was a team waiting for me and to pack an overnight bag. So I just thought I was going to go in overnight. I hadn't really experienced hospital at that point. I've had my fair share of hospital stays since. I didn't really know what to expect. And so yes, I think it was scary. It was overwhelming. I cried a lot, but I was also so exhausted that part of me was relieved that I was going to finally get some support and help around me. Do you ever get tired helping people? It's an interesting question. Okay, so I never get triggered helping people. I want to make that clear. And when people tell me their stories and stuff, I don't get triggered. I'm very past that, very over that. I feel for people, and I think that's where I get tired. I feel for people, and when they share their stories, they share that they need support or help from someone, anyone, and they don't feel like they're being listened to, whatever it may be. I get tired because I feel for them. I'm empathetic. I don't want to say I take on their problems, but I feel what they're going through because I've been through it too. And so I think I feel tired sometimes because I know how exhausting it is for the individual that is struggling, but I don't get tired of helping people. The impact, or to know that my story and by me creating TikToks and Instagram posts, whatever it may be, YouTube videos hopefully, is helping people, makes it so worth it. And it's such a simple thing for me, and also makes my crappy time that I went through worth it, knowing that it is helping people. So long story short, no, I don't get tired helping people. I'm very, very good, and I've learned this throughout my journey, that I need to put time aside for myself. It's not selfish, it's self-care. And so really focusing on that too, and balancing all that is really important. Gotta look after my own mental well-being through all this. What is the best way to bring up to your doctor that you might have mental illness? Again, I think being honest and open is so important. I think the best thing you could probably do is book an appointment with your doctor and go in and just explain your feelings and what you are struggling with, or the thoughts that you're having, or the behaviors that you're engaging in. Your doctors will hear this all the time, and if you give them the right information and you're honest and you're open with them, then they can help you and refer you to places that may be able to give you better support. So I think the only way to do it is to go in. You could take a friend if you feel more comfortable doing that, but just be really open and honest, and just explain what it's like to be you, and what's going on in your mind and your brain, and then they'll know how they can help. What's one thing you wish you knew before recovery? Probably that it was going to be a marathon and not a sprint. I think I was very hopeful that I was going to go to sleep and wake up and everything was going to be better, but learning and letting myself take time to really work on the recovery process and tackle things as they happened, and remind myself that this was going to take some time, but it was going to be so worth it, was really important. So yeah, just knowing that it's not going to be a quick overnight fix, but that it can get better, and that it will get better if I stick to it and I choose recovery every day. Did you ever feel like you were so alone in your illness? All the time. Yes. And I'm gonna do a video on this. I felt so much shame. I was embarrassed. I felt like no one understood what I was going through. I felt so alone a lot of the time. Eating disorders are extremely misunderstood. OCD is extremely misunderstood. I feel like people didn't get it. I felt like I was the only one in the world struggling with it. And I think this is also why I want to use my story, or share my story so publicly, is to let other people know that there are so many people struggling with similar things to what you're struggling with, and that there is hope, and that you can get better, and it doesn't have to be your life forever. But yes, I felt alone, I felt isolated. My eating disorder isolated me. I was alone a lot because I didn't want to be around people, because that caused anxiety. But yes, I felt very alone. And I now realize I was not alone at all. There are so many people fighting battles that no one knows about. Have you ever struggled with ARFID? I struggle with it, and I know no one who does. I feel so alone. I have not, but I do know people that have. We actually did a campaign on Voices of Hope called The Forgotten Few, and there's a section on there for ARFID. You're definitely not the only one that struggles with that. I know you feel like you are, but I know of a handful of individuals that do, and there is help available for you. I'm learning more about ARFID at the moment. It's something that I find really interesting, having not experienced it myself, but I know it has a big impact on many individuals who struggle with it. Please know that you're not alone. You're not the only one struggling with this, and that there are services available to help you through this process. Is it bad to take meds? I'm so embarrassed by them. I don't want to seem weak. I took medication, and again, medication's different for everyone. I don't want to get into a big debate about this. Personally, I found it very helpful. There's nothing embarrassing about taking it at all. I was at the point where I was like, if I can take a pill and it supports me through my journey, it definitely isn't the cure. It's something I did alongside therapy. But if I could do something that made this slightly easier, then I was willing to try that. And medication personally was very, very helpful for me. So no, not weak at all. I'm actually very brave and very strong and recovery focused. Were you nervous when you got admitted to the psych hospital? Yes, because I'd been on the pediatric ward, which was very hospital-like. a couple of times, and the psych ward was more homey, it was less hospital-like, and so it was very different for me. I'd become very institutionalized up on the ward, and so going into a place that wasn't or didn't feel as sterile and hospital-like was very unusual for me. And also being around other individuals that were struggling with their mental health was really, really eye-opening. So yes, I was nervous, but it was the most supportive and incredible place throughout my journey, and I feel so lucky to have had them when I needed them the most. What food do you enjoy most now? Great question. I had lasagna last night. That was delicious, and it was one thing I just didn't eat because it was one of my fair foods, and now I love it. I love pizza. Thai green curry is my favorite thing ever. There's so many foods. I love food. Peanut butter, I don't know if you count that as like it's not like I mean, it's a food obviously, but like it's not like a meal. I was thinking a meal. Chocolate, I just love food. And it's so cool and so weird to say that because it had such a negative impact on my life for so long, or I had a negative, unhealthy relationship with food for so long. So to be able to say I love food is the best thing ever. What was the conversation like when you got diagnosed with OCD? So my mum actually told me this the other day. I'd been in the bathroom for a while and she was a bit concerned. She was like, what's going on? Something weird's happening. And I came out of the bathroom and I was like, Mum, I've got OCD. And I told her. So I was aware what was happening because whether I had looked it up or I felt compelled to do things and the thoughts, I don't know, I can't remember how that came about, but I knew that the behaviors I was gauging in and the repetition was very OCD-like. And so I just came and I spilled the beans. I was like, Mum, I've got OCD, I need help. And it was almost breaking point. I couldn't hold it in any longer and she knew something was going on, and I came out of the bathroom and she was there and it just came out. And so I think the first thing, admitting or letting someone know that I was struggling was really important, and then I went and saw a professional and we talked about it, and eventually started doing DBT, CBT and exposure therapy, and exposure therapy was just the best thing for my OCD. It made such a huge difference to me, which was wonderful. How did you cope with weight gain? So with my experience with anorexia, weight gain was part of my journey. I want to make that clear that that's not the case for everyone that has an eating disorder. All eating disorders manifest in different ways, but I had to go through the weight gain process, and that was terrifying and scary, and my eating disorder hated it, and it was difficult. I'm not gonna lie, it was very, very difficult. How I coped with it, I didn't really have any other option. I just had to. I had to go through it, and I think as I gained weight, I gained so much other things that made no sense. I gained other things. So by gaining weight, I gained some confidence to go and hang out with my friends, and I gained more food freedom. And so looking at what I gained along with that weight gain was really important, the more positive things in my mind. But gaining weight was difficult. When you're doing that, you're going opposite what your anorexia has been avoiding or doesn't want you to do, and that's never going to be easy, but it's such an important part of the process. And as I gained weight, my mental clarity and my brain just became so much more clear, and accepting that took time. It took a lot of time. I would get to a number and I'd be like, I'm not going any higher than this, and then I'd go higher and I'm like, I'm not going any higher than this. So it was a slow, steady process for me, but it was so crucial. What's your advice to someone that wants to start advocating? Find an issue that you think needs changing and work on that change. So I know for me and Jazz, we were like, there's no one telling stories through the lived experience and giving hope to those who are struggling. Let's do that. And now we're working on different projects that we want to see, policy change, etc. in New Zealand and wider. And so I think the best thing is finding an issue that you want to work on, or finding a space that you feel like you can have some change in and starting with that. I think it's also really important to see what's out there. I think sometimes the best thing you can do is join an organisation or group that already does something similar to what you want to do, instead of starting something from scratch, because they probably have the foundations and support around it to continue. And starting something from scratch can be really difficult. But yeah, find an issue that you think needs changing or needs some awareness around. Find something you want to change and work on that. When and why did your anorexia first begin? So I don't necessarily know, I don't have like a definite answer, so to say, but the way that I explain it is anxiety was something I'd struggled with since the age of around 10 years old. I saw something on the news one night which was really upsetting, and from then on I really struggled to sleep at night. I began checking my room and checking around my house to make sure that no one was there that could harm me. Any noise I heard, I'd freak out. And so that that anxiety and those behaviors became so out of control that I looked at something I could control, and for me that was food. I think I did it without really realizing that I was doing it. So it was almost like a follow-on from what I was already going through, a way of managing, or I thought managing, my anxiety. Turns out it made it 10 million times worse. But there was no one thing that triggered it as such. It was just a slow progression from what I was going through. What made you want to speak out about your story? So I felt a lot of shame for fighting mental illness. I felt like I was the only one, that no one understood eating disorders, OCD. I was lying in bed one night and I was thinking of all the reasons I didn't want to share my story, and that became the reason I had to share my story. I was worried about shame, stigma, what people would think of me, if it would ruin friendships, if I'd ever find a boyfriend, etc., etc. And I knew that if I was feeling that, then other people would be feeling that too, and that I had a opportunity and a voice that I could use to make a difference in this space. So I took a leap of faith and I did it. And the morning my story came out on Voices of Hope, and that's how I kind of launched my story to the world, I was terrified, I cried, I was like, my life is over, and it ended up being the best thing that I have ever done.